The war room hummed with tension. Alien commanders from a dozen species stood around the glowing star map, their voices sharp with anger and fear. The air smelled of ozone and sweat. The Supreme Commander, a towering figure in black battle armor, slammed his fist on the table. The holographic display flickered. "We attack at dawn." His voice boomed, deep and final. The others nodded except one dot in the far corner. Where the shadows clung thickest, a human sat. His uniform was plain, his face unreadable. No fidgeting, no tapping, no reaction. Just silence. Dot of Venorian. Admiral, his scales twitching in irritation, leaned toward his comrade. "Why is the human not speaking?" he hissed. "Humans always have something to say." The others glanced at the silent figure. Humans were known for their strategies, their wild ideas, their defiance. But this one, nothing. The Supreme Commander noticed. His glowing yellow eyes narrowed. "You," he growled, pointing a clawed finger. "Human, do you object?" Slowly the human lifted his gaze. His lips curled not a smile, but something colder. Something that made the air in the room feel heavier. The commanders shifted. The silence stretched too long. Then the human spoke. "Just 5 words, you'll see when the killing starts." The whispered fear. No one moved. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. The Supreme Commander bristled. "Is that a threat?" The human didn't answer, just leaned back, folding his arms. His eyes never left the star map where the enemy fleet blinked red, waiting. Draxian officer, his fur standing on end, muttered, "We should lock him up now." But before anyone could act, alarms blared. Incoming signal. A technician shouted. The hologram flickered, then changed. The enemy fleet wasn't just waiting anymore. They were screaming. The first scream, the transmission crackled to life. A alien voice, ragged with terror, filled the war room. They're inside the SH. A wet crunch. Then silence. The commanders froze. The human didn't. He stood, finally, walked to the hologram, touched the image of the enemy flagship, now dark. "Right on time," he murmured. Thought the Supreme Commander grabbed him. "What did you do?" The human met his gaze. Nothing, a pause yet. Outside, the viewport, the stars shimmered. Something moved in the dark. The shadows between stars, the enemy ships weren't dying. They were vanishing. One by one, their signals winked out. No explosions, no debris, just gone. The war room erupted in panic. Scans. Now, the Supreme Commander roared. The human watched, calm, won't help. Tilted his head. "Ah, they're here." The truth in the dark. The commanders reached for weapons. The human didn't. "Who's here?" the Draxian snarled. The human exhaled. Too fast, too large. The human finally smiled. "Now you'll see." The lights went out. The war fleet tore through the void, engines screaming. Stars blurred into streaks of light as the ships punched into battle formation. The Supreme Commander's voice boomed across every deck. "All units, engage." Alien fighters surged forward, weapons hot. The enemy fleet waited, a dark swarm against the stars. And in the middle of it all, the human stood, watching, silent. The first death of battle began with fire. Enemy railguns spat molten metal. A Venorian cruiser took a direct hit, its hull split like rotten fruit. Air and bodies spilled into the black. The Supreme Commander roared orders. "Flank them, target their engines." But the human didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the carnage unfolding. A Draxian officer grabbed his shoulder. "Do something." The human turned. His eyes were ... empty. "I already did." The glitch. Then something changed. Enemy ships stuttered. Their weapons misfired, broken and wet, gasped through. ... They single quotes re-in the walls. ... Silence, then screaming. Not from outside, from inside the enemy ships. The hunt begins on the main screen. Security feeds from enemy vessels flickered to life. Shadows moved. Where shadows shouldn't be, something peeled itself from a corridor ceiling. Limbs, too many joints. A Xerian crewman turned just as black tendrils wrapped around his face. The feed cut. Another screen. An entire squad of enemy Marines firing at nothing. At air, at things only they could see. Their bullets ran out. The screaming didn't. The reveal the Supreme Commander whirled on the human. What is this? The human walked to the viewport. Outside, enemy ships drifted dead in space. No explosions, no life signs, just ... quiet. He tapped the glass where one massive dreadnought floated dark. "We don't fight wars," he said. A shape moved behind the dreadnought's windows, something pale pressed against the glass. "We end them." The truth in the static the last enemy transmission came through. Just 3 words, whispered, "They made us ... Then, the ship's core detonated, not from attack, from inside. The human watched the fireball fade. "Now you understand," he said to the stunned War Council. "Why we stay quiet." He walked away as new alarms blared. Something was knocking on their hull. The battle alarms screamed as the fleet dropped out of warp. Before the crew could even lock weapons, enemy ships opened fire. Plasma bolts tore through the lead cruiser. Like paper, the Supreme Commander roared over the chaos. "Return fire, all batteries." Yet the human just stood there, watching, waiting. Death in the void. The battle raged. The War Council's finest warriors died screaming over the comms. Through it all, the human remained still. His hands didn't shake, his breath didn't quicken. A young officer grabbed his arm. "Please, you have to help us." The human turned. His eyes were dark, empty. "Help you," he almost smiled. "I already did. The enemy's nightmare then." Something changed. Enemy ships began malfunctioning. Their weapons fired at nothing. Their engines burned too hot. A garbled transmission cut through. In the vents, gods, there in the line dissolved into wet. Choking sounds. Silence followed. Then new sounds began. Scratching, scratching, tearing, screaming, the horror. Revealed security feeds from enemy ships flickered to life. Something moved in the corridors. Something. Wrong limbs too long, mouths too wide. The creatures didn't attack. They played. One alien crewman begged as a shadow caressed his face. His screams lasted a long time. The human's secret, the Supreme Commander grabbed the human. "What have you done?" The human looked at the dying enemy fleet. Nothing special. He pointed to a drifting enemy battleship. "Just let loose what we keep." Caged. Inside the enemy ship, something pale pressed against the VIEWPORT, smiling. The warning. The last enemy transmission came through mercy. Please. Then static. The human turned away. "This," he said softly, "is why we stay quiet." As he walked from the bridge, something knocked softly against their own hull. Once, twice. Alarms blared as the War Council's fleet emerged from warp. Before targeting systems could lock, enemy railguns tore through their formation, erupted like a dying star. Scattering molten debris across the void, the Supreme Commander bellowed orders, his armored fists slamming against the command console. All ships returned fire. Full barrage. Yet the human remained motionless near the observation deck, his reflection staring back from the blood-splattered viewport. A dance of destruction-allied cruisers returned volley after volley, their plasma cannons painting the darkness with streaks of blue fire. But for every enemy ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. An explosion rocked the command ship. The lights flickered as oxygen alarms wailed. Temple, screaming into the chaos, were being overrun. Through the carnage, the human's calm voice cut like a knife. "Watch." The glitch that wasn't enemy ships began. Twitching, their formations broke. Weapons misfired. Engines sputtered and died. Then the screaming started, not from the battlefield, but from enemy channels. A distorted voice gasped. ... They single quotes re in the walls. "They're in our skin." The transmission ended with a wet crunch. Shadows with teeth security feeds from enemy vessels flickered to life on the main display. Something was moving through there. Corridors, not soldiers, not machines. Things with too many joints in their limbs. Things that moved wrong, that smiled with too many teeth. One feed showed a Xerian captain firing wildly at empty air until something grabbed his ankle from a ventilation shaft. The feed cut to static just as the screaming reached its peak. The human's confession. The Supreme Commander grabbed the human by his tactical vest. "What did you do?" The human didn't resist. His eyes held galaxies of quiet horror. "We didn't create weapons," he whispered. "We opened doors." On the view screen, the last enemy dreadnought went dark. Then its viewports began ... fogging up. From the inside, the knocking silence fell across the bridge, then thump from below decks, thump ... thump closer now. The human straightened his uniform. "You should run," he said softly. "They don't know friend from foe yet." As the first screams echoed from the ship's lower levels, the human simply walked toward the sound. Humming. The bridge lights strobed red as another explosion rocked the warship. The Supreme Commander gripped his command throne, watching their last defensive line crumble on the tactical display. "All units fall back to a new alert," screamed across the comms. The human didn't even look up from where he leaned against the tactical console, idly spinning a data slate between his fingers. Then the enemy's screams began. A symphony of static. Came the glitches. Enemy ships stuttered in space like broken hollows. Weapons fired at nothing. Engines burned at 300% capacity until they melted. Then the transmission started. ... There in the goddamn walls. There in the walls. The voice cut off with a wet pop. Another channel burst open. Just ragged breathing and the sound of something heavy being dragged across metal. Feast of the Forgotten Thief. Main display flickered to life with stolen enemy feeds. In engineering, crewmen fired at shadows until their guns clicked empty. Then the shadows fired back. On the bridge of the enemy flagship, the captain kept repeating, "We surrender," to empty air as blood dripped from the ceiling. A lone survivor crawled through a corridor, whispering, "Please, please, please," until something grabbed his ankle and yanked him, screaming, into a vent. The human finally moved, tapping the display to zoom in on the last frame. "See the teeth marks?" The math of war the Supreme Commander rounded on him. "You unleashed bioweapons." The human chuckled. "Oh no, bioweapons follow rules." He pointed to the now dark enemy fleet. "Those are what happens when humanity stops pretending to be civilized." Alarms blared as their own ship's internal sensors detected movement. In the vents behind the bulkheads. Between decks, the human straightened his uniform. "You should probably run now." The only prayer left as the first screams echoed from below. The comms officer made the sign of her gods. The human shook his head. "Don't bother. They ate the last ones who tried that." He walked toward the emergency exit, pausing to add, "Pro tip, the things can smell fear." Behind him, something began peeling open the ceiling panels. The bridge shuddered as another explosion rocked the hull. Warning lights painted everything crimson. The Supreme Commander's armored fingers dug into his command console hard enough to dent the metal. "Report." He bellowed. No answer came, because the comms officer was too busy vomiting at what the external cameras showed: the enemy's last stand. The enemy armada was dying wrong, not in fire and shrapnel like proper warships should, but like prey animals in the night. One dreadnought spun lazily, its entire crew deck exposed to vacuum, not from battle damage, but because something had peeled the hull open like a rationed tin dot. Another ship's engines burned at full thrust, while the ship itself remained motionless, as if something was holding it in place. The human checked his wrist chrono. Right on schedule. The broadcast when the enemy flagship's transmission came through. No one was prepared for what they saw. The bridge crew watched in horror as their counterpart, a decorated enemy admiral, crawled across the blood-slicked deck. Of his own command center, his uniform was in tatters. One eye was missing. "Please," he whispered to something off camera. "We'll surrender." Will a shadow moved. The admiral screamed. Then the transmission showed what was left of him sliding across the floor, dragged by something unseen into the darkness. The human explains nothing. The Supreme Commander turned to the human, his voice barely controlled. "What did you deploy?" The human shrugged. "We just opened their doors." "What doors?" A new alert screamed. Across the bridge, the human smiled. "All of them." The sound at your door silence fell across the command center. Then thud from the ventilation shaft. Thud, ... thud, ... closer. Now ... The human straightened his jacket. "I'd start running now," he advised. They always check the bridge first. As the first ceiling panel fell with a crash, the human simply walked toward the emergency exit, humming a nursery rhyme. The bridge lights flickered as power fluctuated across the dying warship. The Supreme Commander's tactical display showed the last enemy vessels going dark, not destroyed, just ... empty. like discarded husks. A junior officer whispered the question they all feared. Gods of the void. What's happening to them? The human didn't look up from cleaning his fingernails with a combat knife. Harvest time, the first rule of warfare alarms, blared as internal sensors detected movement everywhere in the cargo bays, the med center, even the sealed escape pods. The human sighed and sheathed his blade. First rule of human warfare, he said, standing, never fight fair. A ventilation grate clattered to the deck behind him. Something wet dripped from the opening dot. The Admiral's last transmission, the main screen crackled to life with a final broadcast. From the enemy flagship, the image showed Admiral Kvorak, his ceremonial armor dented, his left horn broken, backed against a ruined console. His remaining crew huddled behind makeshift barricades that shook with each impact. "Whatever you want," the Admiral pleaded with the darkness. Will the transmission cut to static just as the barricades exploded inward? The humans mercied. The Supreme Commander grabbed the human's shoulder. "Call them off. They've surrendered." The human's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, they're not ours to call." He tapped the view screen, showing the enemy fleet. "We just ... invited them to dinner." As he spoke, the last enemy ship's lights winked out. Something pale pressed against its bridge viewport for a moment before the feed died. The sound of braking doors, silence. Then Bianca from the corridor. Outside, bang, ... bang, ... The human checked his sidearm. Time's up. He nodded to the emergency hatch. "I'd run if I were you." As the first screams echoed from the lower decks, the human simply walked toward the pounding sounds. Whistling. The bridge trembled as something massive impacted the outer hull. The Supreme Commander's tactical display flickered dozens of red markers winking out across the battle zone. Not destroyed, just ... emptied. A young ensign clutched his sidearm with shaking hands. "Why aren't they attacking us yet?" The human lit a cigarette, the flame reflecting in his dead eyes. "They're polite guests, waiting to be invited in." The Admiral's last lesson. The main screen crackled to life, showing the enemy flagship's bridge in ruins. Admiral Kvorak stood alone amidst the carnage, his ceremonial armor splattered with something black and viscous. "Listen carefully," the Admiral rasped into the cum. "They don't." A shadow detached from the ceiling behind him. The transmission cut to static just as the Admiral's scream began. The human's confession. The Supreme Commander slammed the human against the bulkhead. "You said these were weapons." The human exhaled smoke through his nose. "No, I said we'd end the war." He glanced at the shuddering ceiling panels. "Funny thing about old Earth legends, sometimes they answer when you call." A new alarm blared in, sensors detecting movement in Deck 5. Deck 3, the mess hall, everywhere at once. The sound of many-hand silence fell across the bridge, then scratching at the main doors, tapping from the ventilation shafts, thumping against the floor plates below. The human stubbed out his cigarette. "They're learning how doors work." A young comms officer began praying to her gods. The human shook his head. "Won't help. They ate the last ones who tried that." The only way out. The emergency hatch hissed open on its own. The human straightened his uniform and walked toward it. "Coming?" he asked over his shoulder. Behind him, the main bulkhead dented inward once, twice before exploding in a shower of metal and something dark and many-limbed. The human didn't look back as the screaming started. He just kept walking, humming. The bridge lights died. Emergency strobes painted everything in jagged red slices. The Supreme Commander's tactical display showed nothing now, just endless static and the occasional scream across dying cum channels. A young lieutenant whispered into the dark, "Why us? Why not them?" The human's teeth flashed white in the gloom. "Because we're still breathing." Above them, the ceiling groaned. Something was digging through the hull. The first rule of Monsters. Supreme Commander grabbed the human by his tactical vest. "You said you controlled them." The human didn't struggle. His breath smelled of gunpowder and old blood. "First rule of Monsters, Commander." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nobody controls them. You just point them at your enemies and run." A ventilation shaft burst open, spilling something wet and twitching onto the deck. The Admiral's last transmission. The main viewer flickered to life one final time. Admiral Kvorak's face filled the screen, nor what was left of it. One eye stared. madly as his broken fingers scrambled at the console. "They're not weapons," he gasped. "They're not even alive. They're just ... hungry." Behind him, shadows moved against the walls. The transmission cut to static, but not before everyone heard the wet tearing sounds, the sound of many mouths silenced, then a clicking from the air vents, a rustling behind the bulkheads, a dripping from the overhead pipes. The human checked his sidearm. They always go for the officers first. He nodded toward the emergency exit. "Might want to start ring." As the first scream echoed from the crew quarters, the human simply walked toward the sounds, humming a lullaby. "The only truth that matters." The Supreme Commander caught his arm. "What are they?" The human paused. For the first time, something like pity crossed his face. "The reason humans never start wars, Commander." He pulled free. "Just finish them." Behind them, the main doors exploded inward, but no one stayed to see what came through. The bridge was a tomb of flickering screens and broken bodies. The Supreme Commander stood alone in the wreckage, his once pristine armor now slick with blood, not his own. The human stood by the shattered viewport, staring at the graveyard of dead ships drifting in the void. "It's done," the human said. The commander's voice was raw. "At what cost?" The human finally turned. His eyes were older than the stars, the only one that matters. The last broadcast static hissed from the speakers before resolving into a final transmission. The enemy throne room appeared, or what remained of it. Their emperor knelt amidst the ruins, his crown shattered, his armor rent. "You think you've won," the emperor whispered, "but they'll come for you next." The human leaned forward and pressed a button. "We know," he said. "Dan, cut the feed." The truth in the bones. The commander grabbed the human's arm. "What did we unleash?" The human looked at the corpses surrounding them. "The same thing we buried 10,000 years ago." He pried the commander's fingers loose. "The reason we built walls between the stars?" A new alert blared, external sensors detecting movement in the dead fleet. Something was coming home. The sound of the end silence, then a knock at the airlock, a scratch at the hull, a whisper in the vents. The human straightened his blood-stained uniform. They always check on their keepers first. As the first bulkhead groaned under unseen pressure, the human walked toward the sound, not afraid, not relieved, just ... resigned. The final lesson. The commander raised his sidearm. "You knew this would happen." The human didn't turn. Every civilization learns the same truth eventually. Behind them, the doors exploded inward, but the human's last words cut through the chaos. "Some doors shouldn't be opened." Then the shadows took them all, and